commitment to planetary health. And what we're creating is a hub, a place for people to come, safe in the knowledge that everything that they experience as a student at VU will be considered through a planetary health lens. And that includes our teaching and learning offerings like the one we're talking about tonight, also our research, also what we do in our own backyard. Our university has a sustainability initiative that is absolutely committed to making a difference to the future health of our local communities and our global communities. And our community engagement is a key piece of that work too. So VU is a place to come if you're looking for a place where you will be enveloped in planetary health. Perhaps it would also help to mention that the people on the panel tonight are some of the people that you might come across in teaching and learning experiences that you'll have at VU, and also are researchers in the planetary health field. And so the questions that you send through tonight will be really helpful in being able to learn more about what it is that they bring to planetary health and what it is that we hope to offer to students who are joining us for this planetary health journey. Jeannie, perhaps we could start off by asking you a little bit about the graduate certificate in planetary health.
Thanks very much, Corinne, and I very much appreciate everyone that's joined us here tonight to hear about our new program, which is tremendously exciting that we have developed a graduate certificate in planetary health with a focus on being place-based, which I know, Corinne, you're going to facilitate further conversation about in a moment. What we've tried to do in this course is look to what it is that people are asking questions about, what it is that people want to know more about, what knowledges they need, what skills you need, to both look to changing a job, progressing a career, but also living in our country, and also be able to take an approach of looking after land and people and everything within this. So I think what we've tried to do is look at what are key skills people need, recognising that a lot of the people that may well be interested in coming in and doing this course at the moment are really looking to maybe having had this opportunity for a bit of a pause as all of our lives have changed so dramatically over a short period of time. I think we've focused a whole lot more upon how did this come to be, but also on, gee, we can actually adapt and change to things very quickly. And I think that's particularly good for us to think about in Australia, where so many of the challenges that have been confronting us around climate change and environmental degradation, racism, across many things in our community, we've said that's hard. It's really too hard to do, and yet we've found we can do things. And it has consequences, but it's a great time to be actually looking at how we can address these. And that's, Corinne, what we're trying to do in this course. So I can talk a little bit later about some of the units and the way that we're focusing those, but it's about, being of the moment, picking up what it is that we hear. We've had people contacting us across our, not just our education and research staff, but also across the professional staff of the university, saying, we've got to respond to this period of change now. There is no new normal, yet let alone going back to an old normal, because that didn't quite work. So what are we going to do instead?
Fantastic. Thanks, Jenny. And I know that you have a strong history yourself of advocacy and of really taking on the tough challenges of social inequity in a range of different spaces. And I'm looking forward to you bringing that into the classroom to have conversations with our students. Max, perhaps I'll go to you now. You've come from a different kind of background in public health and worked in a number of spaces, WHO, World Bank, as well as in local places. Can you perhaps tell us what it is that drew you to planetary health? What draws you to this area?
Yeah, happy to speak a little bit about the current and the opportunity, and warm welcome everyone. my attitude to planetary health is as you sort of like hinted at my CV, is I always like to expand and push boundaries and force myself to learn more from everywhere around, and not only to rely on that what I was originally trained in. So I early on realized that determinants of health, I have medical training, are quite often lying outside the medical profession, outside the health service, and quite often many more lie outside. And then if you realize the impact of environmental degradation, that opens up then outside even brings in environmental determinants and so on. So I'm seeing, as you said, planetary health and place-based approaches much more of an approach, a philosophy. I like to engage, and I like then also to transmit to students that it is a new way, a challenging way sometimes, to look at complex problems we are facing. And therefore I encourage everyone to take that opportunity to go beyond and above their current background and learnings.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Max. I'll just maybe repeat a couple of those things, because I think we might have lost you a bit in the middle. I really love that focus on the fact that planetary health is not a discipline in itself, particularly. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It's really a lens that you can adopt to look through whatever disciplinary background that you come from, to really lift it up another notch, to look at environmental determinants, social determinants, how things fit together, and to work with others from different disciplinary backgrounds, which also for me is one of the things that draws me to it. I love being challenged by people who speak a different language than me, speak in the STEM sciences or the HAS sciences, and bring to it a different eye to the same challenging problem. Thanks. I might move on to Karen and ask, what does place or context matter when we're talking about planetary health?
Well, for me, I'm here on the panel coming as a Yorta Yorta Warrap Warrap woman, and I'm really hopeful to see and to know that there's going to be a lot of Aboriginal or Indigenous curriculum running across the grad cert, and so I think there's a nice, really great theme in that. So for me, as a Yorta Yorta woman, country or place. So place is country, and country is vitally important to Aboriginal people, and it's also vitally important to other sorts of people, but it's a spiritual and physical and a connection that can't be broken. So I remember walking out of the High Court decision on the Yorta Yorta native title claim, where a white man's book overrode my aunties and uncles' connection to country, and these people had been on country since they were born. They knew country, they understood country, and they were just, you know, washed away as if they didn't exist. And these are deeply hurt feelings that people carry, as well as anger that the white system doesn't understand country or understand place in the way that Aboriginal people do. And so for me, I'm hoping that this course can actually instill a bit of that meaning into people, you know, that knowledge that Aboriginal people know country as mother, and the importance of mother and the importance of country. And so I came out of that High Court hearing with so many tears in my eyes that I just couldn't work out what to do. And my sister cousin, Monica Morgan, said, "Don't be sad. This is not the time to be sad. This is the time to be angry. This is the time to work out what action we can take and how to go back on country and work through how we can make sure that people know what country means, and make sure that people know that your aunties and your uncles have been on this country and that it's vitally important to them." So for me, place as country is vitally important to this course. But what it also does is so country is also local. And so if people are taking care of their local place, their local country, they're also taking care of the planet, you know, and if you're not taking care of your local, then you can't take care of the whole. And so if we can get that sort of notion and concept and context into the grad cert, I think it will have a huge impact in the future years to come, and for the graduates who are going to come through that course. So yeah, for me, that's why place really, really, really matters, because it holds in my soul, and it holds in my spirit, and it holds in my being. And so that's the story I want to be able to tell the students that come into this place. So yeah, thanks for asking me.
It's a fantastic response. It does feel as though sometimes we'll get caught in the idea that these are global issues, they're very big issues, and there's nothing that they can personally do. But actually what you've highlighted is local, where we live, the decisions that we make every day, the commitments that we make to the people around us and to the place that we come from or that we live in, are the things that can make a difference. And yes, there's often a lot of emotion that goes along with that feeling of being helpless, or you know, that things are too big and too scary for us. But actually taking the first can be the most powerful step. And I hope that for many of the students who come to take this course, that this will be one of the first steps that they take towards understanding their position in place. What is it that they can offer to place? And it's an approach. It's not even only to say that you can only impact your local place. It's to say that being aware of place and context and the importance of a good fit between a solution and the place will stand you in good stead no matter where you work in the world. So many of us on this panel and at BU have worked in lots of places. I currently have a project in Malawi and a project in a remote community here. And I also work in urban areas, and each of those places needs something different and calls for something different. So place, I think, is really at the heart of things, to make sure that whatever we put forward has a good chance of working, because it is fit for place and fit for purpose. Fantastic, thanks, Karen. Chris, I might move along to you, and perhaps you might want to also address place, but I was going to ask you to extend it, perhaps to think about one or two of the big planetary health challenges that we're facing now, or that you think we'll be facing in the future, and perhaps also from a community psychology point of view, since that's your disciplinary background that you bring. Except you're muted.
I was following Chris's rules to the T. So thank you, Corinne, Max, and Karen, and Jeannie for those responses. As I was hearing it, I was reflecting on community psychology, and so I'm sit and teach in the community psychology program in the College of Health and Biomedicine, and I also am fortunate that I spent some time with KJ at Wundani Balak, and also connected through my research program with the Institute of Health and Sport. The question about some of the sorts of challenges resonates, I guess, for me with some of the work that we've been doing within a structure we call the Community Identity and Displacement Research Network. And some of the challenges, I think, and I think that has come to the fore now, relates to me, or reflects to me, ongoing social inequities. And inequities that have, I think, their roots in systems that have started a long time ago. So I think about colonial structures. I think about why people migrate, who migrates, who are the most vulnerable, who migrate, not only because of natural disasters, but often because of human interventions into environments. Where those people end up, and where on the ladder in the new societies they end up. Where refugees end up in the Australian context, outside of our communities, where Indigenous people continue, as KJ have mentioned before, remain displaced, marginalized from particular sets of decision making. And we can also, we can think now the way in which COVID, for example, have displaced people into their homes, transformed their lives, But then also think about, I mean, who gets to go to work, who has to work, and often the burden of particular sets of experiences, and typically negative experiences, falls on people who have fewer access to resources and hence are not part of the decision making. So I guess for me, the planetary health sort of frame is something that that brings into focus both history. It brings into focus much broader levels of analysis, but then also asks us to think about our embeddedness in particular sorts of places, our embeddedness within communities, our embeddedness within structures, so schools, university systems, health systems, sports clubs, and so forth. So Max has mentioned social determinants. And so those structures, I guess, to some extent, are also the ones through which we experience social determinants. So whether those are gendered, race, class, and so forth. So the planetary health lens for me is exciting because it wants to deal with and engage with the complexity of the systems that influences and impacts upon human lives and people's everyday lives. I feel like I've got one more thing that I want to say. Which I think is important, because I think KJ has mentioned this, and one of the sorts of things that comes out of this discussion for me is that the planetary health also invites in new ways of thinking about the challenges that faces human societies, but beyond human societies. So it is inviting relationality. It is inviting the primacy of ethics in our relationships, and then it's asking us to take responsibility for enacting relationality and ethics. And so that's another sort of challenge. So planetary health for us at VU will be something, will be a project that continues to evolve, that is generative, and that's in the making. So that's me. Thanks.
I love that idea, Chris. I really love the idea that, we're really at the beginning of something here. And I'm sure that for the next generations, the conversation about planetary health, even we're seeing it in our youth now, is second nature, that it's so obvious that we need to think about the future, and that's about the intersect between the planet that we live on, the communities that we create, and the people that live in them, and the health and well-being of one is hugely interdependent on the other. And that it is that very complexity that stands in real contrast to the way we usually slice and dice our world. We usually have little professional boxes. We all do our little bit in our box. And I also love that about planetary health. It cracks it wide open. Yep. It actually welcomes people in that have different points of view, even very passionate conversations, often in a planetary health space. And I imagine that our classroom with the grad cert will be just like that, where people will bring their own backgrounds, their own experience, their own histories, and really give an opportunity to nut it out and to put things on the table in a safe place, to really explore them and push them and prod them until there's new possibilities that kind of spring forth and have a new life. And it's not always comfortable. That's the other thing that I really love about planetary health, is it's not always a comfortable conversation. We all make choices in our lives that maybe when we reflect on them, then we think, maybe that wasn't such a great choice. And if I think about, my growing up, plastic, who cares, so plastic. Now, of course, we think very differently about that. What we eat, whether we eat meat or we have a planetary health diet, a more vegetarian or vegan diet, lots of those choices require us to really look deeply into what the choices that we have made, and whether or not it's time to revisit, to reimagine, to create a new future. So thank you for that. Okay.
Sorry, I felt like, oh my God, we can have a conversation now, but no.
I know. It's one of the things about planetary health, I think, is that there's so many hours we could keep going for. I'm going to go to Sarah, but I noticed, Gina, you had your hand up. Was there something that you needed to chip in with?
I did. I just noticed that my colleague Gillian Marsh has joined us too, and Gillian and I are teaching in the first unit, the introductory unit, and where what we are seeking to do is to put into practice some of the things that Karen was just talking about, of that yeah, our intention with this course is to actually foreground Aboriginal knowledges and Aboriginal ways of knowing, of being, of acting, of being on country, and thus being a focus in the ways that not just in here's a topic, here's somebody presenting, but making very conscious decisions too. And this is part of this the cracking and the way thinking of when we're looking for some selections of readings on a topic, but we will look to see what our Australian Indigenous colleagues have written on it, have published, have produced. We'll look internationally as well for this. So we make very conscious decisions about the sorts of things and making sure that we are cracking open some of the traditionally dominant knowledges which have informed and come up wanting.
Thanks, Jenny, and thanks for joining us, Gillian. It's lovely to see you there. It sounds like you guys have been having quite a lot of fun preparing the materials for the course.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why I was actually a little late joining in today, because I'm still working on the assessment task that I'm preparing.
Fantastic. Okay, well, maybe we'll hear a little bit more about those as we go. I'll let you get settled into the conversation. All right, I'm going to move along to Sarah. Sarah, who's one of our postdoctoral researchers, who's right at the beginning of a career. Really, well, for old people like me, it feels like right at the beginning of your career. I'm sure you don't feel quite so young. But I guess, many of the people who will be considering taking this course are much closer in their career development to where you're at than perhaps where the rest of us are at, although I should just speak for myself. I'm really interested to know, for somebody at the beginning of your research career, what does a planetary health lens offer you in terms of looking forward in your career path?
Sure. So maybe I'll start with, it's funny that you say that I am early in my career, because I was about to reference earlier in my career as the starting point. So I guess just for a bit of context, my work is in looking at how we can modify lifestyle to support mental health. And so when I started my work, I was really interested in individual behavior change. So my PhD work was looking at the relationship between diet and depression. And so at the beginning of that, I was all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, really interested in how we could modify people's diets. And I quite quickly learned that the science could only take us so far. And so I could recommend all of the diet aspects that the literature could suggest to me. But if a member of a community did not have access, if they did not have the literacy, if the diet was not sustainable, then it would not take me very far. So I think that my perspective changed in terms of, I guess, where I see my career going. So I think it shifted really from looking at individual behavior to where these, and I'll use air quotes, choices fit within broader communities, within the environment, how this relates to the planet. And so when I think about my career looking forward, I think that my perspective is broader. I can see where I sit, where my research sits within sort of the broader system. And I also think that there's a bit more social responsibility attached to it. I have a clear idea of my responsibility as a researcher and the ethics surrounding some of the suggestions or the type of research that I do and the type of recommendations that I make for people. So I think that a planetary health perspective really shapes my career goals for myself in that way.
That's fantastic, and I'm really excited to have the next generation of researchers thinking in that way. Thinking beyond those small questions to really trying to place their interest in that broader kind of framework. And I'm really pleased that we will have many of our planetary health researchers at VU contributing to the grad cert. We've just, as you know, had a round of planetary health grants, $1 million invested by the university. We had more than 100 applicants from a range of disciplines right across the institution, and we funded 25 projects, I think, with more than 80 researchers, ranging from early career researchers all the way through to senior researchers, on things as diverse as how do we recover from bushfires? How do we support communities to recover from bushfires? How do we understand how Indigenous knowledges fit within the planetary health space, to how do we transform coffee cups into eco bricks, through to trying to understand the youth perspective on mental health as we come through COVID, looking for vaccines for COVID. There are sport programs and outdoor education programs, and how that can contribute to mental health and well-being of the community. So all sorts of really amazing projects, all through that planetary health lens that, as you say, adds a different perspective. Each of those areas is important in its own right, but placing it in that broader context, looking for place-based solutions, that'll be the hallmark, the signature of the research that is actively going on at VU, and that will feed into the learning opportunities for our students in the graduate certificate. And I also hope that some of those might choose to go on and become researchers and to do their PhDs at VU as well. It would be pretty wonderful. Gillian, I'm not sure if you're still there or whether your connection's gone. Oh, yes, you are. Okay. You might be on mute though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm interested to know, what are the things that are exciting you about the grad cert at this point?
I guess on a personal note, the grad cert for me gives me the opportunity to, I guess, revisit my my background in environmental studies. And that dates back to my PhD time. But it also gives me the opportunity to teach into a space that's quite different to where I'm teaching at the moment, and to see the, I guess, the way that a lot of what I'm teaching within education at the moment is also just as relevant within an area like the grad cert. So it's a great way to see how there are a lot of threads within what I'm teaching already that will be really beneficial and really help to add breadth to the grad cert.
Fantastic. And again, it's one of the things that I really love is that it helps people change path. Planetary health, when attached to any other discipline area, can help people develop new skill sets and perhaps open up opportunities for themselves in the workplace, but also in their own thinking and in their own life, because planetary health has such a personal impact on the choices we make on a day-to-day basis. It's not simply what it can do for you in the workplace, but also about the way we live, the choices that we make. And perhaps that's a good question to throw to the panel, and I'll just leave it as an open. Sorry, Jeannie, yes?
There's just a question from one of our participants, Brett, who comments that so far we have not heard any mention of the Sustainable Development Goals or One Health. So what focus does this program place on these frameworks?
Fantastic. Thank you, Brett. So the Sustainable Development Goals certainly are at the core of our thinking around planetary health. We've joined the Sustainable Development Goal Network in Australia, but that's also an international group of people. We're very much, we've entered the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, which are based around our contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you have a look on the VU website, you'll see that our very first submission was fantastic. We were very successful in being able to, I guess, highlight the ways in our teaching, in our research, and also in our practice at VU that we can make a contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. So the teaching in the grad cert will definitely be focusing on the link between, sorry, Jeannie?
I was just going, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was going to say addressing the SDGs is one of the cores of the course, because we also know that addressing SDGs within the Australian context, rather than the focus Australians have often had in the past upon this is something for other parts of the world, but looking at our own part of the world has become more important, and this is a very good thing. So we actually do have a kind of interrogation of the SDGs, but also the applying of the SDGs to particular case studies, to particular activities that students will do for assessment in the course. So very much tying this in with the SDGs, with the other campaigns and frames that are being used, like One Health, to actually see how we can see what's in common, what's different, what's applicable locally that we can share globally, what globally, how that then works locally, and to get that whole, close that loop, I suppose, as much as we can, and I suppose it's probably also important to say that amongst our staff at VU, we actually have quite a lot of people who have in various different ways contributed to the actual development of the SDGs at the international level, as well as the implementation across the whole 17 goals in the local context. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for learning about it, and we'll certainly, I suspect, amongst our students coming into the course, have people who actually have some expertise in this area too. And that's one of the reasons why we're expecting a very rich and diverse classroom, where there'll be much peer learning as well.
Thanks, Jenny. Fantastic. Much better than I could have said. The question that I was coming to was really about what is it that you would like to see in and for our Planetary Health graduates. So each of us here, I guess, has come to Planetary Health from a different path. It's a different place in our journey. What is it that you would like to see for our Planetary Health graduates? Any of the panelists?
Well, I could start there. I like to see independent and critical thinking, like really challenging the existing pathways and systems and frameworks, and in addition also bringing yourself or bringing your experience, your relation to place into the course. That would be something I would like to see.
Fantastic. Thank you, Max. Anybody else like to add to that one?
Yep, I'll jump in. Oh,
Karen.
sorry, Christopher.
Okay, no, go.
Jumped over top. That's because I'm your boss. Only one day a week, though.
Correct. It happens to be today.
Yes, must be.
Not that we're into hierarchies.
No. Thanks, Jeannie. So for me, I really want to see graduates who can think outside of their own spaces and have a concept of how to create justice for all people, but particularly for Black people, you know, particularly given the sorts of global events that are happening, but also the types of things that are happening to Aboriginal people in Australia. But people who also, you know, understand if we can change the way we treat each other, we can change the way that the systems actually treat people. And so we then look at helping other people who are in spaces like in poverty or in homelessness or those sorts of spaces, and we give hope and kindness to society, and we're able to do that. Our graduates were able to do that because they can think in a different space, and so being kind to people also helps you be kind to the planet. So, you know, I'd like to see that sort of stuff come out from our graduates.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karen. And Chris?
No, I think Karen has probably said just what I was going to say, but I was going to add, Max had mentioned critical thinking, and I think this idea of critically reflective practice, or not only reflecting at the personal level, but as others have already said, reflecting on the impact of the knowledges that we value on other people, being open to transforming our own knowledges and our own ways of thinking, valuing other knowledge systems. So as others have said already, that the Planetary Health sort of framework is going to open up spaces for us to enact the values of justice, of equity, not only in our practice, but also in terms of the way in which we think about what it is that we produce, what we value, and whether that is going to be good for everyone else in our worlds.
Fantastic. Yes, Sarah.
Well, just to add to what Chris just said, and it's something that I am developing currently at VU, but I think what I would hope for graduates of this program is thinking about ways that we can actually engage and work with communities. I think it's common, particularly from a research background or from a clinical background, to come with the sort of top-down approach. And something that I'm really learning here is engagement with community and collaboration and co-design. And we come up with solutions together, and looking to the wisdom of members of the community for solutions.
Fantastic. I think that's the absolute heartbeat of a place-based approach. And I think without that, our chances of success in the long term are fairly slim. So yeah, I think that's kind of critical to everything that we do, both in our thinking, but also in our actions. And I guess that's what I would like to see for our graduates, is people who are ready to act. You know, thinking is really important, and it's a necessary starting place. I would like to think that our graduates will be taken to a place where they are both informed but confident to act and to make a difference and to make a change, as you say, alongside with the communities that they serve, that we serve, and to see that as a partnership rather than an expert position. Fantastic, thank you. Jenny, just checking in with you about whether we have another question. I'm mindful that I've already gone over a couple of minutes from where I plan to be, but I've got another question I would like to put if there isn't one.
No, go ahead and put another question, and then we'll see if anyone else responds, and then we'll move towards a few facts and figures and see how we finish up the evening.
Okay, thanks. So I guess this, again, is a bit of a reflective question, follows on from that idea about what would we hope for our graduates. What difference has planetary health made in your life? What change have you made in the way that you live because of your experience and learning about planetary health, or because of the challenges of looking through a planetary health lens?
I'll have a go. Oh, Gillian's going to have a go. Go, Gillian.
Go, Gillian.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have a go at that too, Corinne. That's a great question. And yeah, I think my immediate response would be one of the things that's really made a difference to me in my life, in the context of being part of an Aboriginal community and a connection to people who are really closely, intimately connected and feel related to the country and the environment, is that you can't do it alone. It's impossible to stand up for and protect your country when you're trying to do it in isolation. And I saw my community struggle with that for decades. And then I reached a point myself where I actually took the step of reaching out to other Aboriginal people from across other parts of Australia, and also reaching out to NGOs like green groups across Australia, and it made a huge difference. It was absolutely transformative, and now I look back on that, you know, which is something that I started to engage in probably 25 years ago. It's made a massive difference. It's created a fabulous legacy.
Those network of relationships are really, sometimes they buoy us during really difficult times and provide new opportunities. That's fantastic. Yeah. Anybody else like to add to Gillian's response?
AJ was going to have a go.
All right, we'll go Max and Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I wasn't putting up my hand. I was secretly giving my child 5 more minutes. But that also brings me to why planetary health is like, if you have children, if you have any this type of intergenerational investments in the future, you gotta have to do planetary health and be engaged and aware and actively participate. So it's sort of like a no-brainer for all of us being concerned about the future.
It's a good point, and it's often our kids who challenge us to do it. You know, they're the ones saying we want a better future. It's up to you guys to make that happen. Thank you, Chris.
Look, I think for me, maybe the sort of moment that we're in now have just elevated or heightened the sense of our planetary interconnectedness of people across the world. And then the other part of that is the Indigenous and First Nations knowledge systems, and how that how within a planetary health framework it offers us a different way to think about that interconnectedness and where we can go. So I think those are the sorts of possibilities that I think this planetary health program is opening up for us. So I just see it as possibility, and I'm quite excited about that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And I think, you know, there are so many ways that if we look around ourselves at VU, it's one of the things about it being a whole of university commitment. Everywhere you look, there's another inspiration for how we could be better or different in this. And so, you know, even when we look at our different campuses at Werribee, we have waste recycling expertise. Every time I see one of those projects come across my desk, it makes me think differently about, you know, how I'm managing with my waste at home and in the office, and it challenges you to really think about, you know, our water researchers, our waste recycling researchers, our mental health research, all of it. Every time you are surrounded in our community at VU by people who are thinking about these things, and so every day it challenges us to step up. And on our website, on our Planetary Health website that will be launched next week, there is a pledge page that is encouraging people to go on and make their pledge. You know, what is it that you are prepared to pledge to do to make a difference in the world today, tomorrow, next week, next year, for the next generations? And so I think that commitment from our students and from our staff, and the fact that our VU community draws our students and staff together in that conversation, I think is part of what will make this a very powerful experience for people, is that it's not simply something that you turn up for a couple of hours a week. It's something that is wrapped around you from the minute that you sign in, everywhere that you look, to inspire you and to support you to make a difference in the world. And I'm very aware I've gone a little bit over, Jeannie. I'm really sorry about that, but maybe I'll hand to you now if you would like to wrap up with some comments about the course.
I've just got a couple of questions though too. I'll take up first of all.
Okay.
The first one is actually Max speaks to that you've authored work on chronic illness. So there's a question about will there be some focus upon your area on, and this isn't something I have knowledge of, zoonosis, especially under One Health, given that 3/5 of new illnesses are zoonotic.
Yeah, I'll just to be brief, I think nowadays One Health has finally received a lot of recognition in its importance, thanks to COVID, if you like so. And despite my research is a lot about the forecasting of COVID, but we have to really think about how it came about. And I believe COVID is not a single event, but a possibility that those things can come more often as more we encroach other habitats, and that's a consequence of. So it will come up. Ideally, I would like to write another unit, but we are already full. So it's just starting the discussion, but highlighting the importance to be part of it.
Thanks, Max. We have great ambitions. We're starting here with our first graduate certificate and looking towards articulating, as we have with many of our programs at VU, into the graduate diploma and then into the master's area, as well as also picking up planetary health themes through, which already exist in many of our courses, both in the Polytechnic as well as higher education. But it's also sort of looking at some of the ways that we can make this a sharper focus for what we do. And and of course being more inclusive of more people across the university. There's another question here. As a graduate of this course, and with planetary health potentially being an unknown term in modern life or some industries, how do you see graduates making a difference in their everyday lives and work? Well, I'll just, first of all, Corinne's nodding here, so I'll just see if she wants to pick that up first of all.
Sure, absolutely. I think as in all new areas, terms sometimes take a little while to catch on. The great thing about this particular term is it has such a long and fantastic heritage. It has morphed through a number of different stages of evolution, if you like, and this is the current version that builds upon it. I think there are parts of it that are very familiar to most workplaces. Almost every workplace now has to have a sustainability discussion or part to their strategic plan. Almost every organisation that you're likely to work in will have sustainability on their mind. And so that's one entry pathway. There will also be, in most organisation strategic plans, discussions about equity, and making sure that there is equal access to employment and to good employment conditions. And again, this is absolutely core planetary health conversation. And so while the label may not be there, the concerns and the issues are there. And it's about trying to support the environments that we work in and our employers and our future businesses to have a broader understanding about where those entry issues fit in that planetary health landscape.
Yes, I agree, Corinne. The terminology is there in some cases, it's not in others, it's catching on. The planetary health language has come back into popularity. I'm old enough to remember last time it came around. And that it's now being focused around and has both a disciplinary area and I suspect will quickly move into being a professional area as well. So the naming will be used, but of course, as with any course of study and investigation, it's what's actually in it, what you can actually attest to. These are skills and knowledges that I know. And that's some of the things that we will look at in the course also, how to go and talk about and talk up what you've learned and help, and where people want to use it for career movement, how to do that. Why don't I switch here, because I know we're quickly running out of time, to a few more details about the course, Corinne. The first of all,
I was just going to say, can I just add one last comment on that? I think the most common conversation that I hear at the moment as we come through COVID is, what will the future look like? Let's reimagine the future. We need to figure out what our new normal is. We need to think about new ways of doing things. And for me, that's a planetary health conversation. So again, even though the language may not be there, every workplace right now is having those conversations. Every community is having those conversations. Every family is having those conversations. And so this is a real opportunity for us to help support those conversations through a planetary health lens. I'm mindful of time, and I do, before I hand back to you, Jenny, just want to thank very much each of our panel members for making the time this evening to come and be part of this discussion. I've loved having us all in the one room again. It's felt like such a long time since we've been together to be able to have a conversation like this. I wish it could go on longer, but just to say thank you to each and every one of you, and also thanks to our students and potential students who are listening in and who are thinking about whether or not this is something that you might like to try. I really hope that you'll join us. So thanks to everybody, and over to Jeannie.
Thanks very much. I think we've talked about what the course is about, but I suppose the question is, why do it now? And the now is because it is a new, rapidly developing field. And because of what we've been going through recently and are still going through, has actually made us start thinking more about how we change, how we adjust, and just how things are going to be different. So in the reality of the world of work, many jobs have gone, others have changed and will continue changing. There will be new jobs. There'll be new professions, as they've often, I know kids at school are constantly told the jobs that you may do in the future have not even been invented yet. That's not terribly helpful when kids are trying to work out what course to do, but it is actually true. many of us, of course, over this period have also paused and reflected upon what we want to do now in our workplaces, but also in our lives too. So, and our new certificate responds to this moment. And as you've seen just listening to some of my colleagues talking here, this is, of course, it's been developed by people thinking about other people. And so for people looking to learn and develop skills applicable in their current or a new workplace, and of course in their communities. So now is the time to take the plunge. And that's because this is our first offering, so it's first delivery. So you're on the start of something new. But also under the federal government's COVID recovery scheme, there's a heavy discount for undertaking the course, which is much cheaper than the usual rates for doing a graduate certificate. So if people are in the position to and are eligible, it's a really good opportunity at this moment. It's not usually my thing to do the sort of salesperson part of it, but it's very relevant at the moment. So, and I think you've seen now some of the diversity and indeed how grounded our educators and our researchers are. You've met a few of the people that will be contributing to this course. There'll be many others because we do bring together our teaching people, our researching people, and indeed people from across our professional community. So without having been able to go into details, but you can go into the links and find out more about this, we start with an introduction, a place-based approach to planetary health. Then we start to apply this through responding to climate change through a planetary health lens. Then looking at, so relevant in this moment, we started, of course, thinking about this and how we may do it back at the time of the bushfires earlier in the year, disaster resilience and response through a planetary health lens, drawing upon our colleagues with years of professional and academic and research expertise. And our final unit is about making a transformation. How do we make a healthy planet, and a healthy planet for everyone, to make that we're all in this together actually true? On the logistics, it's an online course. It has a remote delivery class time on a Monday and a Thursday from 6 to 9, which will be pretty flexible about making sure that all students are able to be involved. It's offered in our award-winning block delivery mode. So that'll be 4 units offered sequentially over 4 months, graduating in December. So Chris, I'll switch back to you now to finish us up for the night. And thank you very much for organising this for us.
Not a problem. I'll just switch to the course page, and that might make it a little bit easier. Sorry, I just got this. It's frozen. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Oh, my screen just froze for a bit. So in terms of applications and applying, the process is quite straightforward. So simply jump onto the webpage and you can search Planetary Health VU or the grad cert in Planetary Health at VU, and that should be one of the first links that come up. Otherwise, go to the VU homepage and type in Planetary Health. All you have to do is simply press the red button there, apply, and they'll take you straight to the admissions landing page. Create an account and upload your documents. In terms of requirements and eligibility, it is quite straightforward, and the barrier of entry is almost nil. It's actually quite easy to get everything sorted and apply for this course. So the completion of any Australian bachelor degree will be enough to suffice entry into this course. In addition to that, if you have a minimum of 5 years of approved work experience, will be considered admissions into this course. And I think I wanted to ask you a question, Jeannie, just about this. This has been great so far, I must say. Hats off. It's been.
You want to sign on?
Maybe. But I was thinking, what type of person? Let's say if we are, I guess, quite new to the industry and quite open to planetary health, what type of person do you think would be considering this type of degree that hasn't worked in the industry before? Because my immediate thoughts would be someone from psychology, social work, community development, those types of areas. But what do you foresee, I guess, people joining this degree from?
Well, fortunately, I can base my response, Chris, on some of the queries that I've had and people that have approached me and been talking to me about this. And that has included people such as an engineer that said, the sort of work I've been doing, I actually don't want to do anymore. It's drying up, so practically, but I also have become really much more aware of the impact of our impact upon the planet, and we need to change what we do from a moral viewpoint as well as just a really pragmatic one. Could this give me a start? I've talked with a paediatrician who said, got a great practice, great career, but I really want to think about the ethics of the way that I go about the work that I'm doing. And I want something that's not just about the philosophy of it, but actually is about, that will actually talk to me. And she said about how we should be stepping more lightly on the planet. I've had people in education, not teachers, but also people working in education in other ways. The education system, and Gillian mentioned this, is always under scrutiny, but always needs to be looking at changing and responding to how things are now. So I'm also expecting some interest from people who might want to shift a focus in an education career, just as similarly people who, interestingly, who do work in emergency services, saying, really well trained, technically great, know we can respond to things, but I need a frame to understand why I do what I do and how I could move it around a bit, find like-minded people. So I'm hoping, and I have a suspicion that this will be so, that we'll have a classroom of people from some quite different areas, younger, older, advanced in a career, changing careers, starting careers, not really focused on careers at all. But who are looking to finding like-minded people and who have an appetite for learning new knowledges and new skills. And that's what we can provide at the university.
Amazing. So like the United Nations of planetary health, potentially.
Chris, can I just add to that? You know, one of the things I've noticed about working in this space is that people are inspiring. And they might think of themselves as ordinary people, but joining this conversation and pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone and finding ways to make a difference to their communities and their planet, you bring out the best in people. And so that's what I've noticed when you ask what kind of person. Well, it's all kinds of people, but actually the people that come out at the other end are different people. You know, they've stretched a bit, they've opened themselves up a bit, and they've really connected with others in a way that surprises them often, I think. So I think that's the bit that I love about working in the space, is that people are hugely different, but really on a path towards growth and to making a difference, not just to thinking about it, not just to sitting having a chat about it, but they want to be out there doing something. And so they're there to make themselves ready for that.
So I think you know, what we'll be creating, and Julie and I will be starting this off at the end of the month in our first sessions, of a challenging classroom for sure, but also a safe and supportive classroom. And I think that's also about practicing what we're talking about too.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everyone. So before we wrap it up, I'll leave the floor open to any other last questions. Feel free to raise your hand. We can enable your mic, so you can ask the question live if you'd like. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat or Q&A section. So we'll just give you about 30 seconds or so. Feel free to raise your hand now if you'd like. Okay. And whilst we wait there, I'll wrap up a few other things too. So if you would like to get in contact with Jeannie about the course itself, I have linked in the chat function there. There are limited spaces to book a consultation with Jeannie to get a bit more of an in-depth conversation in relation to planetary health and also international community development. So feel free to use that link. I'll post it again right now. Yeah, so it should be available early next week, but also you can email her jeannie.ray@vu.edu, and she'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. So we have had one question just come through. Oh, so thank you. No, there wasn't a question. I was saying thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for today. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Karani. It's been an amazing session. And I hope everyone has had an informative session today about planetary health. And thank you for attending the Graduate Online Information Series. We hope to see you again at Victoria University and on campus very soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.